Welcome to the fourth episode in a Legendarium series about the great women of Old England. Today we'll be talking about Hilda of Whitby. Though many call the years between the fall of Rome and the Norman conquest the Dark Ages, there was much to appreciate about this time. One such person to appreciate is Saint Hilda of Whitby, a nun, educator, evangelist, and patron of the arts. We'll be talking about her early life at the court of King Edwin, her founding of Whitby community, the split between Celtic and Roman Catholic Christianity in England at the time, its resolution at the Synod of Whitby, and how Hilda became a Catholic saint. Hilda was born in the year 614 AD in the Kingdom of Northumbria. Her parents were Hereric and Bergyswith, the former being the nephew of King Edwin of Northumbria. For reasons unknown, King Edwin sent his nephew Hereric to live in exile at the court of the King of Elmet in what is now West Yorkshire. While hosting Hereric, the King of Elmet poisoned him and murdered him. Outraged at the cowardly murder of his nephew, King Edwin invaded and conquered Elmet, adding its land to Northumbria's. And as a child, Hilda and her mother were then returned by her grand-uncle Edwin to the Northumbrian court where she grew up. Hilda was baptized at the age of 13 in AD 627 with her great-uncle in a small wooden church built specially for the occasion. And then, from the ages of 13 to 33, she simply vanishes from the historical record. Most likely, she was married off sometime in her teens, as was typical among Anglo-Saxon aristocratic girls at the time. In AD 647, her husband probably died, and she decided to become a nun. Indeed, many nuns in Anglo-Saxon England were widowed noblewomen who faced a difficult time remarrying due to traditions at the time. Now, at first, Hilda wanted to join her sister at a convent in Merovingian France and made her way to the coast to pick up a ship bound for the continent. However, before she left, she was recalled back home to Northumbria by Saint Aidan, the Bishop of Lindisfarne. Aidan asked Hilda to establish a small group of women under monastic rule on the north bank of the Wear River. She spent a couple of years learning the traditions of Celtic monasticism, and then went out to head up the new community at Whitby. At the time, King Oswald, a devout Christian, generous patron of the monasteries, and a kinsman to Hilda, was on the throne. And King Oswald gifted Hilda 10 hides of land on which to found a double monastery of monks and nuns. And by the way, if you'd like to learn more about King Oswald, follow the link in the description. Now, in the years that followed, Hilda's Abbey at Whitby became one of the great Christian centers and schools in the north of England. 5 men from the Whitby community, all students of Hilda, would become bishops, and 2 of those bishops would later become saints, John of Beverley and Wilfrid, the Bishop of York. All of these men were deeply important to the spread of Christianity in England, but it was Hilda who first taught them. Indeed, Hilda's fame as a Christian teacher was so great that monks came from across Britain to ask her for advice, and even the Northumbrian kings Oswald and Oswy came to her for counsel. However, one of her most important students was Caedmon, a shepherd who worked on her land. Hilda realized at some point that Caedmon was a great singer and poet, and she urged him to develop his talents. More importantly, she provided him with the financial support that he needed to put down his shepherd staff and take up song. And Caedmon became one of the first great English poets, putting Bible stories into verse more easily understood by a largely illiterate population. But in her time, Hilda was one of the leading abbesses of Anglo-Saxon England, so it's not surprising that her community was chosen to host the important Synod of Whitby in AD 663, which would make an important decision about the future of English Christianity. Now, we've already talked about the divide between pagan and Christian Anglo-Saxons at this time. However, English Christianity had another split between Celtic Christianity and Roman Catholic Christianity. Celtic Christianity, which came from Ireland, is today most famous for its beautiful and ornate crucifixes. However, Celtic Christians were very different from Roman Catholics. Indeed, they relied more on monks and abbots as Christian leaders than bishops. Celtic monasteries basically functioned as towns, with their own governments, their own tax collection, and their own police. However, the real sticking point at the time was calculating the date at Easter, and the differences between the Celtic and the Roman Catholic calendar meant that there could be 2 Easter celebrations in England a month apart. Now, King Oswy judged it important to resolve this difference before it became a full split within Northumbria. And the debates that followed at Whitby were long, intense, and sometimes angry. Hilda herself championed the Celtic cause, and she found herself debating one of her own former students, Wilfrid, who argued the Roman case. Now, Hilda, even though she debated long and hard, sensed that the wind was blowing in favor of the Roman party. Why was that? Because King Oswy rejected Hilda's advice for once and joined the Roman party, and his opinion carried a lot of weight. Now, why was Oswy supportive of the Roman party, setting himself against his own kinswoman? Well, number one, Roman Catholic Christianity was gaining ground in the south of Northumbria, and obviously Oswy didn't want to alienate his subjects. And secondly, Oswy wanted friends in Merovingian France who were devout Roman Catholics. Bowing to both religious and political reality, Hilda came to support the adoption of the Roman calculation of Easter and urged others to support the decision as well to prevent a split within the English Church. And her example convinced many Celtic holdouts to embrace the Roman calculation, though some Celtic clergymen wound up leaving Northumbria for Iona, the Hebrides, and in some cases Ireland. However, it seems there weren't hard feelings between King Oswy and Hilda because Oswy gave his own daughter Elfled to Hilda's community, both for her to raise as a nun and to groom as her eventual successor. And that was a wise decision because in AD 647, Hilda began to suffer a series of feverish attacks. As Hilda's health declined, Elfled began to take over day-to-day management. And 6 years later, in AD 680, Hilda died at the age of 66, a strikingly old age at the time. According to later writings, at the time of her death, a nun named Beguit Hackness saw Hilda's soul making its way to heaven, and her tolling of the Hackness bell was heard 13 miles away in Whitby. Under Elfled's leadership, Whitby continued to function as a monastic community until the Viking invasions 100 years later. The abbot of Whitby at the time was forced to flee the Vikings, taking Hilda's relics with him. And Whitby remained abandoned for centuries until the Norman conquest, when a Norman knight named William de Percy refounded the abbey on a much grander scale. And it remained until the dissolution of the monasteries, when its treasures were removed by King Henry VIII. Today there is little left of the building except a ruin, but Hilda's legacy of Christianization in northern England remains. And that wraps things up for this episode of The Legendarium. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like what you saw, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. If you've got anything to say, please let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and have a great day.